Isn't life just so interesting? I have to ask, has anybody last week, Dr. James gave you guys a directive? I shouldn't say directive. He asked if you would participate in doing something, which was, do you guys remember what he asked? They don't listen. Sorry, Dr. James. What he said was, get clear. Get clear on who you are. He started last week. Are you laughing? Eric's like, he didn't remember to get clear. Or is that not what he asked? No, I'm just kidding. He asked for all of us to take this month to really get clear about who we are. And I love that he started off with that directive of getting clear about who you are. Because for me, getting clear of who I am is getting clear about my individualized use of source, of mind, of this infinite field of possibility. Getting clear of who I am in this world as that. Now, the ironic part is when I started to think about getting clear about who I am, I started to realize that that's different for me than clarity. So there's a difference in my head between being clear and having clarity. And much like we spoke of earlier today with Dr. Kirby, having that clarity, having that flame of clarity within which never goes out is knowing who you are at all times, right? That to me is having clarity. And when you have that type of clarity, to your point, is that you can step back and be the observer and say, wait a minute, is this what I want to experience? So to me, having clarity is having that I am consciousness. I am. That I am consciousness. Having the clarity that is always there. Being clear means to have a directive on that clarity. Being clear is being able to understand what you believe in that moment. To me, being clear can sometimes wave, shuffle up and down. When I started my path down this wonderful journey of being a practitioner and a minister and a doctorate of consciousness studies, I started off with taking a few classes, and I loved them. I loved being in the conversation. I loved the people that I was in conversation with, and I was clear back then that I was only going to be a practitioner. That's as far as I wanted to go. I was clear about that. I talked to Dr. James about it. He said, you should think about ministerial. And I said, no, I'm clear that this is what I want to experience and that from here, this is it. But then I realized that there was a clarity within me that knew that I wanted to stay in a conversation. Whether I became a minister or not, that was irrelevant. I'm grateful for it. But it was irrelevant. It was the clarity of staying in a conversation where I constantly grow my consciousness. And it is different every single moment. So with that clarity, I became clear that I would join ministerial. So that to me is the difference between being clear and having clarity. Being open to the directive of what is going on in your life. Dr. James talked about his quote from, was it Socrates? Certainty brings or breeds insanity. Was it Socrates that he said, or Aristotle? Can't remember. Anyway, the point is saying certainty brings insanity. Why is that? Because when we're that rooted in what we think is right, it's merely an illusion. So even me being clear that I did not want to be a part of the ministerial class, it was an illusion to my clarity of wanting to stay in the conversation. Now, that didn't mean that I was wrong for being clear or in that moment that I didn't understand who I was. I just was clear in that moment of what it is that I did or did not want to do. But listening to that deeper, small voice within. And when we talk about, in spirituality, we talk about that Christ consciousness that is within us, that is us. And in quantum physics, we talk about it as the field of pure potential, of being open to what is the potential out there in the world at all times. So when you have the clarity of that Christ consciousness, and you have the clarity of that field that is wide open, then anything you claim is possible. And you can be clear about what it is that you want to create. So for me, the clarity of being in the conversation, while I didn't realize that I wanted to create a ministry and I didn't realize that I wanted to get a doctorate, it didn't become clear to me until I was able to really be the observer of my own clarity, of wanting to stay in the conversation, of wanting to grow my consciousness, of experiencing my understanding of what this means. Because for each and every one of us, it's a different understanding. And so why we come together on these Sundays is always at the very end to remember who we are. Because when we remember who we are, we can take our clarity, which is the shared I am that I am, and be clear about which direction we'd like to go. We each have a very different direction, right? Karen is helping people in Uganda. And her clarity brought her to be very clear about what it is that she wanted to do, and continues. And it grows. I'm sure while your clarity stays the same, how you achieve it and the directive in which it takes, how to be clear in it might change a little, right? And it's allowing yourself to follow that path, to be clear in the path, to have your own directive in the path, but also be open to it. So that certainty of like, this is how it needs to be, that will drive you crazy, you remind yourself that it's actually an illusion. For right now, this is me being clear. But I also recognize that that's an illusion. What's not an illusion is the clarity that I possess. Stephanie Banks, who is an author, says, clarity is the moment we see without opening our eyes. Isn't that great? Clarity is the moment we see without opening our eyes. Dostoevsky, I read a great quote about his, it's a very long one, but he talked about the clarity that he possessed that only lasted about 5 to 6 seconds. That he believed that we couldn't that we couldn't sustain more than that because it was just too transformative. And he even said, when you're in that state, when you're so connected in that state, you are the mountains. You are the seas, much like the song says. And he continues to say, there is nothing to forgive. And how often do we hear Dr. James say this? When you're in that state, and for him, he says it's 5 to 6 seconds. Okay, great. There's nothing to forgive. And that there's something beyond love that is indescribable. That love is a small portion of what actually is happening. This is the Russian author saying this about clarity and feeling how clear he is when he is in that I am consciousness, that I am presence. And Ernest Holmes says, we are never left without a witness of the eternal. And in our greatest moments, in those flash-like visions of mystic grandeur, we know that we are made of eternal stuff, fashioned after a divine pattern. That is having clarity. That is Dr. Holmes, having the clarity of knowing exactly who he is. And while we've talked a lot about even his ministry, how it shifted, it started at one point and shifted, much like Dr. James's. All of us continue to shift, continue to change. And that's having the clarity of knowing who I am and being clear in the direction that you want to go, knowing that it is not a direct path all the time, that it is winding, and having the fluidity and the spontaneity to be clear in it, have the clarity in it, to move through it. The title of my talk today is, Who's Coloring Your Clarity? So this might sound a little dualistic because for me, clarity, like I said, is that knowing of who you are, who I am at all times. That to me is clarity. But who's coloring your clarity? Because the truth is, sometimes we shift off of our own clarity thinking that somebody else has it right. Dr. Holmes also says this, practically the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to. And sometimes we believe somebody else's clarity, like they must be right. And let's be clear, we're not believing their clarity. we're believing what they're clear about. I'm clear that this, that, or the other. Oh, well, I better be clear about that too. Clarity is different than being clear. And because so many times, what Thor and I did a class a couple weeks back. We did the 4 Agreements. And I love this book. I love reading it and rereading it, and I made a commitment to myself to try to read it I'm going to read it at the beginning of every year. Being impeccable with your word. First of all, to me that is remembering who I am. If I remember who I am, I'm impeccable with my word. And how this relates to clarity for me is, we forget. At certain time you're like, you know what, I'm old enough. I've done a lot of studying. I totally get clarity. I get clarity. Like, I understand it. I am conscious. I'm awake. I'm awoke. But the truth is, we aren't always, are we? I mean, this was an example that I used in class, and I won't actually do it here because that might be a little offensive, but I will be a little provocative. If someone comes up to you and just gives you the finger, what do? Just puts it right in your face. Middle finger. You're not happy, are you? That's going to make you mad. That's going to upset you. And even now as I'm saying this, you're probably like, well, that's rude. But guess what? There are places in Africa where that means let's pray. And the reason I bring that up is because I want us to see these little innuendos that we don't even realize that we've made an agreement to that shift our energy. That's what Ernest Holmes means when he says, practically the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to. Now, I'm not saying don't be offended if someone does that to you, but I want you to realize right now, how many times is your own energy hijacked by an agreement that was made a long time ago by your family, by your society, by the world, that isn't really yours? And how much longer are you going to let your energy be hijacked? Staying in the clarity and being clear of who you are, that's the important part. The second that you feel that energy, your own energy whirling around because of somebody else doing something, now you're living in the outside. Now you're allowing somebody else to come in. Now you're letting yourself be directed by someone else's being clear and telling you what you should be, who you should be, what you should do. And I'm going to invite you to reclaim that back right here. We come here every Sunday, we become super inspired, we get in our cars, and we then throw the middle finger at somebody who's cut us off on the road, right? It's true. I do it too. But what we have to remember is that split second. It's that split second before, and was it Viktor Frankl? Audrey, maybe you would know this. Was it Viktor Frankl who said the second between the reaction and, yes. It's in that split second where we get the opportunity to be clear between the action and the reaction. That split second that you have before you have to react to something. That's the second that you have to get clarity. To bring that clarity back into your awareness. To not let it be taken away from you by somebody else who you probably don't even know. And make a whole story up that winds you into this craziness. So who's coloring your clarity? Is it you? Is it your family? Is it your society? I want you to think about that. Next time you're anywhere you might be, grocery store, car, work, wherever it may be, when you get really upset, when you're just hunkered and upset because of someone else's reaction, taking you out of that clarity. Take that second, as Viktor Frankl says, and think about your reaction. Think about what it is who you want to be in that moment. And like Dr. Kirby said earlier, it's having that awareness of the observer to step back and go, what am I experiencing? Is this the thought? Is this the belief that I'd actually like to experience out in the world? Is whatever this person has done to me that has created this reaction in me, this person or the situation, that has created this energy in me, is that now what I want to experience out in the world? I invite you to think about that, if that is what you want to invite out in the world. Because I think in order to attain clarity, we have to be clear about what we're confused about, right? And what confuses us is other people hijacking our energy. Don't you get like, why am I feeling like this? Don't you ever feel that way? Like, I'm so, like, why am I feeling like this? Someone cut me off and now I'm letting it. I took a trip down to Palm Springs to visit a friend this weekend. And the 3 hours that I was in the car, I literally allowed someone else to hijack those 3 hours. 3 hours! I mean, thank God it's not a lifetime, but still, 3 hours is a long time. I could have been listening to something else, upping my energy, but I allowed a situation that really had no meaning whatsoever hijack that time. And I'm fighting with someone in my head. What a waste of time. I mean, I can admit it. I can say it. This happens. And suddenly, as right before I'm entering Palm Springs, I'm like, did I really just spend this time in my head fighting someone? Did I just go nuclear in my own head? Oh my God, I did. I totally did. In that moment, I gave myself the permission to be clear about who I am, to have the clarity, to be bathed in the clarity of this I am that I am. But it took that moment of confusion, of going, wait, did I really allow that to happen? I did. I did. And now I don't. Forgive everything. So again, I'll say this. In order to attain the clarity, we have to be clear about the confusion that we are experiencing. Because we do experience that sometimes, right? We do experience the confusion of our own energy or what someone else can bequeath upon us. And instead of allowing it, taking that moment to be clear, that meditative moment, it really can just be a second of just changing your energy. Author Stephen Maraboli says, it's a lack of clarity that creates chaos and frustration. Those emotions are poison to any living goal. It's lack of clarity that creates chaos and frustration. Those emotions are poisons to any living soul. So I think really what he was saying in his book, it's called Life, the Truth, and Being Free. I believe that what he was saying is lacking clear focus. But I actually like what he says, lack of clarity, lack of knowing who you are at all times. That lack of clarity is what causes the confusion. It causes the separation. It causes you to not know who you are in that moment. And when you remember who you are, everything else just washes away. It's having that I am clarity. I am in itself is a complete sentence. I am. I am clear. I have clarity. I am. The I am clarity. My last quote that I'd like to share with you guys is by Sri Ramana Maharishi. Thoughts come and go. Feelings come and go. Find out what it is that remains. Think about that. Thoughts, beliefs, experiences, feelings, they all come and go. It is our job to find out what it is that remains. And what it is that remains at all times is that I am clarity. Is that clarity, that flame that is within you at all times. It is never extinguished. It is always there. It is removing the blocks that we have created, whether with ourselves, with our family, with our society, with our partners, with whomever. Releasing those blocks out to remember that clarity of who I am. So, I'll leave you with this. I am here, I am clear, and I am clarity. Namaste. Okay.